In this video, we're going to talk about using object-oriented programming in classes in Tkinter apps. So right now, what we've been doing with Tkinter apps is we just have been entering everything on um, just as commands, top-level commands in the file here. So what we want to do is instead use classes to contain our widgets and event handling functions. And the reason why we would want to do that is because as your apps get more and more complicated, it becomes harder and harder to structure them if you do it this way. Okay, so moving forward, I want you to use this object-oriented approach with classes in order to do this. Okay, we're going to start with this example. And this example, basically the layout has been done and everything. And there's no functionality here with these buttons or anything. And this is the example that we went over in the previous video. We added the event handling code and everything else. And what we want to be able to do is type in the name and ID and click add, and it will add those entries into this text here. And then when we hit the clear button, that will clear out the text and erase everything in there. Okay, so what we're going to do now is have the usual import. Instead of defining this root instance of the TK class, what we're going to do is just make our own class. And so we're going to class, I'm going to call mine app, and then I'm going to make this a child class of that class. So I'm making a child class instead of an object here. All right, and then what I want to do is just move all of this code into the class itself, and I want to put it in the init method of the class, like so. And at first, this is going to seem a little bit different than what you're used to, but in the long run, this approach is going to be a lot better. It's just easier. You don't have to worry nearly as much about where you place things within your app here. So I'm going to move everything into this, and I think there's a button that will just automatically indent this for me. So somewhere up here, indent selected lines. I just hit tab and do it that way. All right, so that moves everything inside this init method for the class, and then outside of the class, right, what you're going to do is create an object and then run main loop on that. All right, so the problem is what we've done here is kind of move everything inside. We've taken away that root name there, so we're going to have some errors when we do that. Root is not defined. Okay, so instead of root, the things that we were calling root before, we're going to call self. So self, because we've moved it into this class, that's how we would refer to that. So here is root. I'm going to change that to self. I'm going to change this to self, and it's in a lot of places. Later on, what we might do is to move, just have a frame that we put in here, and we'll pack everything into the frame. That way you can separate things even a little bit more. Okay. All right. So next up, when we try to run it, we got rid of that message about root. But here you can see I get maximum recursion depth exceeded in there. What we need to do is, because we are making this app class a child class of the TK class, what we need to do is to call the init in the parent class, and we need to do that up here in the first line. So super refers to the parent class, and double underscore init double underscore. So that calls the parent class in it, gets the parent class set up, and then the app, the child class app here can get set up. And there we go. So now we're kind of back to where we were before. We've got everything here inside the init function. So next up, what we want to do is to add some of our event handlers that we had in there. And so we need to set up the string variables like we had before. So I'm going to create a string variable called name var. And I'm going to set that up on this name entry here. So I'm going to change text variable here to name var. Oops, not a string, but just name var there. And then another one for the entry. Or for the text. No, it was, let's see. For the ID, right here for this one. Oh, it's ID var is what I was calling this one. Okay, so that works. So that's how we're going to get the text right out of this entry here. When that changes, right, then what's going to happen is it's going to update these variables name var and ID var. All right. So let's first go with the clear button. Okay, and for the clear button, that is down here. Right here. I call it ID button, but I should give that a better name. All right, so what I'm going to do then is to make the function, right, that handles what happens when the clear button is pressed, right? And so what I'm going to do is put command equals and then self dot delete text. And you'll notice I did that differently from the previous one. And so what I'm going to do is to put that as a method in this class. So I'm just going to go down here and make that method delete text self, because it's now inside of a class, right? I need that self parameter there. And so what I want to do is to, when the user clicks that, right, I want to manipulate this text. Now this text is up here in this init. So if I try to do text dot delete 1.0 tk dot end like I did before, then that's going to cause some problems, right? I get name text is not defined. So that's what happens when I click the clear button. So if I want to have the text and be able to manipulate that from this other method right here, what I need to do is to make that an attribute. So self.text, and actually I need to do it up here too. So if I put self.text, now that becomes an attribute, and then I can access it from down here by just putting self.text there. And there may be a couple of other instances. So now, right, everything on the clear button is working. So hopefully you can see that that part is a lot simpler than what we were doing before. Before we were passing arguments to this text button down to this method. So it's just a lot simpler. All I've got to do is put self on these other things here. So, all right, next up is the other method, and that one is for the entry, or for the add button. So that is right here, which is called name button. Again, I should probably just call that add button. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do command equals self dot add text. And then I'm going to go down here and create an add text method with self as the only parameter. All right, and then again, I'm going to manipulate this text here. I want to put text in there, so it's self.text.insert. And then I want to do it at the top. All right, and then next I want to get the value from this ID var here. So before I was doing that as ID var dot get, and then I put a space. Then I did name var dot get, and then plus, and then a new line character, so I can go down a line like so. All right, but when I try to do that, you'll see that I get that same issue, right? So if I put a name here and an ID and try to add, I get that same problem right here. ID var is not defined, but we've already seen how to fix that, right? And how we fix that is to make this an attribute. So we're going to have to do it on both name var and ID var here. And now they become attributes, and so they'll be visible down here in add text. But I will need to put self.ID var here and self.name var here. All right, and so I get name var is not defined. And that problem is from this up here. Here I'm referencing name var, but since I put self in front of it, it becomes an attribute, so it can't find it. So I need to put self.nameVar here. And I'm going to also have to do the same thing with this over here. So I didn't change nameVar to self.nameVar everywhere in there, so that's the problem there. All right, and here is how it comes out. And so now we ought to be able to add names in here. And clear that out and add things back in there. So now we have the functionality that we had before. Okay, and you can see how much simpler, again, this is, right? All I've got to do is just make the thing that I want to control from this an attribute, and then I don't have to pass in there, and everything's contained nice and neatly in this class. You have to worry a lot less as things become more and more complicated about where you're positioning things and how to access those things. All right, so that is it on this one, and I will work some more examples and post some videos on those as well.